just to speak on what Mark said about he and Stuart Scott kind of changing the vernacular of the way games and sports centers were called. It was, I'd be in college and I would write my stories covering our men's and women's basketball teams.
Yes.
Except back in those days in the early 90s, I would write the way I talked. So it was never running. It was running, jumping. I used a lot of ellipses, and I always work hip-hop lyrics into it. And I remember the first story I wrote, our editors didn't understand what I wrote, and they rewrote my entire story. And I remember our basketball coach caught me throwing papers, the school paper, in the trash. Like, I went around to every stop on campus. I was so mad, and I would dump these papers because I felt like they ruined my story. So I would wait. I wouldn't submit my stories until deadline.
So they could not do that.
Change it. And then when Stuart and Mark Jones and Stu were around, it was like, that's it. Like, Mark Jones once said during a game, kicking the serious flavor G. And me and my boy Paul Zeiss looked at each other like, did he just say that on TV? Kicking the serious flavor?
Right.
So, that for me, he and Stuart really kind of cemented the fact that I thought I was on to something by the way I was writing, and I was just so happy to see those guys have that forum to be able to talk the way we were talking and the way I was trying to write. So
let me give you something.
Yeah.
Let me give you something. I'm going to get emotional because I do love you, man. You mean a lot, and I'm serious when I say this. This is not a setup. I know how I love setting you up and taking the middle key and all this. This is serious. Hearing you say this, because I had a front row seat to Stu Scott, as you know.
Yeah.
I had a front row seat to everything. His copy, his handwriting, everything that he wrote, and his copy. He wrote exactly the way you just described the way you wrote.
Yeah.
With ellipses. He sometimes would put like 15 dots in a row. And it would mess up his prompter because the 15 dots, because they did not, whoever was messing with your copy, they might have done that to start. I don't know, because he predated my arrival. His copy was not to be touched.
Yeah.
And it was filled with gettings, not getting.
Yeah.
Exactly what you just said. So you were onto something.
I thought so.
And no wonder you felt like you were being heard and that he was echoing what you were doing, because he was doing the same thing. He would have all of his ellipses. It would be all of these dots in between his copy. And I thought to myself, I don't know how he's reading it. Plus, he had eyesight problems to begin with.
Yeah.
And then he would write his catchphrases in his own handwriting on his shot sheets, the same way that he would say it on the air as the way he would type it in the screen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
So I'm thrilled to be able to bestow that to you years later, that you were onto something. And he'd have done the same damn thing you did, which is throw those newspapers right out.
Yeah.
And then and then figure out how to game the system, as opposed to, trying to knock the door down because you knew you'd be banging your head against a wall.
Yeah.
And you needed to do what you had to do to get across what you needed to get across, because it was more important to get that style out there, as opposed to fight whatever system might be preventing it from happening. How does that sound?
Yeah, that was pretty much it, man.
This is
pretty much it.
One of my more favorite moments we've had here. That was cool. I'm glad you brought that up. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.